Very good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to those of you who are here in person as well as those who are logged in through Zoom. So we have a live streaming over here. So this is WKWSCI School of Communication and Information's Leading Lights Series, and in this is a platform in which we invite the top scholars globally to come and share important insights on contemporary issues related to communication and information. So for today's session, and it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Professor Gobinda Chowdhury. So allow me to give a brief introduction about him. He is Professor of Information Science at the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow. And Professor Chowdhury has dedicated over 30 years to teaching and research in information science and has held senior academic positions across the globe. His research focuses on how people access and use information in different contexts and on the sustainability of information services and systems. And Professor Chowdhury, he has authored or edited 18 books and more than 180 research papers, including his recent book, AI and Information Access, Benefits, Challenges, and Lessons. He has also served as both European and Global Chair of the iSchools organization, of which WKWSCI School is one of our member schools. And he has been invited as invited speaker at numerous international conferences. So we are delighted to have him here today to speak on a timely and important topic, information access in the era of generative AI, sustainability and research challenges. So please join me in welcoming Professor Chowdhury to the stage.
Thank you, Dion, and good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to convey my sincerest thanks to the Dean of WKWSCI School of Communication and Information for inviting me here, and to all of you for coming here and attending my presentation. As you can see that the title of my presentation is Generative AI for Information Access. So I would like to sort of cover some of these points. Access to information in general terms, and I would like to take you through some of the conventional approaches to AI, conventional AI, and then move to the generative AI to try and demonstrate what are the differences. And then I will move on to some of the implications of the generative AI for the knowledge ecosystem. Now, when I say knowledge ecosystem, this will be largely within the academic and research context. Now, knowledge ecosystem can be defined broadly in different ways. People who work in, for example, the stock exchange, they also work on knowledge, and that's a different knowledge ecosystem compared to the one that I'll be talking about here. But you will get an idea because the context of my talk will be related to what you have been doing and what you will be doing in the world of data and information in the context of academic and research and scholarly activities. So my talk will be presented and based on the book that came out last week, actually. I forgot to bring a copy. I received some advance copies, but this is the book. And some of the content of my presentation also has already been published. One paper has been published in Journal of Information Science last year. A paper has just been accepted in the same journal, Journal of Information Science, which will come out next month as an advanced online copy. So you may be able to get some more information in those publications. So essentially, let me give you kind of a very broad picture as to where we stand. You probably have heard this in other contexts, that data and information is considered as the new gold in today's world. Tech companies are the richest in the world, as you all know, and then don't produce anything rather than sharing information. and facilitating access to information. Now, we all use these tools, ranging from search engines to social media, and of course, conventional sources like the libraries and databases and so on. Now, some of this information is free, but some are closed access. So, before the internet era, I think let me divide my my talk and kind of the background into 4 different eras. Now, I will soon show you some examples of my previous work, and then you can see how ancient I am in terms of my age. But we can divide it broadly into 4 different eras. The first era of digital information systems and services started in the 1960s. The first set of information retrieval research was done, and we still use some of those parameters like recall and precision and so on that were first built in the 1958. So since then, the first era of information systems and services were online information services, and that had to be accessed remotely. Then, as more and computer and computing power became more, it became cheaper, as more affordable, then we could have access to information through different media on our desktops and so on. So this is all pre-internet era. Data and information could be accessed, but the process of accessing information was through gatekeepers. And these gatekeepers were journalists, authors, researchers, and so on, and there were publishers or news agencies or various other agencies. They were controlling that information and ensuring that that information goes through some kind of a check process, some kind of a quality control process before we access that information. And access to information also was limited. Then came the new wave of the internet and the web, where anybody and everybody could be a content creator as well as content user. While that brought the information kind of access and information use, it widened that, which was earlier limited to a specific group of people, academics, scholars, researchers, and also some decision makers and so on. But then with the web and the internet, information world became open to everyone. And also people could then create their own information. That has got good and bad sides. The good side is that you did not have to go through a formal communication and publication channel and various rounds of checks and processes and so on. The downside became that the quality of the information could not be ensured. So the shift, this is a major shift, and this was particularly important while technology made it possible to get access to that information. The burden was moved to the user to ensure that the information that they are accessing is of the best quality or is the most appropriate and so on. Then came the next phase is the social media, where we could all create information, and share information. Knowingly and unknowingly we create information, and that information then can be used in a number of different ways, commercially, for example. But the good side of it is that information also became free at the point of use. But as they say, there are no free lunches. So there are also downside of it, that free access to information, because pre-computer era, pre-internet era rather, there were processes for publishing information. There were processes for controlling and ensuring the standard of information. Well, some of these still exist, and I will highlight some of these in my talk. The point I'm trying to make here is that there's a big shift from the pre-internet era to the internet era, and then the social media and these platforms. Then came generative AI. And generative AI brought a new promise, which I will show and discuss with you as to what major challenges this brought, and then try to understand how it has impact on the overall information ecosystem in the context of research and scholarly information. So this is where sort of, a scholarly information context. We use data and information in every day, like when you are a student, for example, or we are academic and researchers, we regularly use information, access information. We create data and information, and we generate new knowledge that improves or contributes to the science and technology, economy, society, and so on and so forth. Now, this is particularly important, the later part, that we have a responsibility as academics, as researchers, as scholars to create information, generate information that reaches the intended audience and that has the impact, expected impact on the economy, on society, and on creating sort of new knowledge and for businesses and various other sectors. Now, we will see that what potential implications it might have on through generative AI unless we have some controls and some measures in place. And what are those? I'll discuss that in my talks. So normally, you are familiar with this. This is a simple example that, for any information within the research and scholarly context, you can go to the university libraries. This is the web page of the NTU University Library, as you can see. You can go through the standard interface, you can do the search, you can go to a specific database, the library subscribes the databases, or you can go to the digital repository of NTU. The reason I'm showing this is that there are, as you can see, there are 3 different players here, or 3 different types of content. Now, the general interface of the university library gives you access. You write a query there, any topic, any author, any subject, and then you get a list of items. Mind you, a list of items, not the information. If you ask, what is generative AI or how generative AI can have implications for information retrieval, you will not get the actual answer. You will get a list of documents. And that holds good exactly the same if you select a database like Web of Science, Scopus, or ACM Digital Library, and so on. Or you go to the institutional repository, and again, this is particularly important here. Institutional repositories are again curated databases of publications and research publications and research data sets. So this is important here, that anything that we access through our university library, we expect that the outcome is based on the curated and validated data and information. Okay, so, and this is particularly important, that this is a question we will raise through some examples in a while, that is this guaranteed through the generative AI information that we get through various tools. So what do I come from? Okay, and why are you here to listen to me? And you can ask a question that, why am I wasting 1 important hour of my life sitting here in front of you? Well, I can give you some examples of who am I, what have I done. My area of interest is information retrieval and information access. That's my area of interest. And this research spans over 3 decades. The first book of information retrieval that I published was in 1999. Many of you were not born then. And I was at NTU at that time. Okay. Also, I'll give you some examples. I don't know whether you can see, that's not important, but these arrows show 3 publications that I had with my first PhD student here at NTU. She's a very well-known professor now. You probably have heard her name, Ying Ding. She's a professor at University Texas Austin, UT Austin. And she's a professor for a number of years. She was at other institutions. And these are some of my highly cited documents. I have about 40,000 citations on Google Scholar, and these are some of my citations. You probably cannot read, but I can read these dates for you. The last one was in 1998. And and the other ones in 2000, 2001, and this was pre-Google era. The reason I'm highlighting this is to show that where my interest lies, and I will refer this to today's world and the generative AI output. This research was how when someone asks on a particular topic, in this case we did on the topic of information retrieval, because of two reasons: because I know the subject and I know the domain, and therefore the recommendations and the topics that would come out, I would be able to verify and test. And Subhat and I was the then head of the division, and Subhat and I were supervisors. I was the first supervisor. And what we did was, imagine the situation in pre-Google era that you want to do a search on anything on information retrieval. You enter that query, any word, any term, it would bring a visual map of all the possible terms in the discipline of information retrieval, and that we collected from literature from 25 years of information retrieval research, and we did a lot of statistical analysis to identify the word co-occurrences and correlations amongst different words and so on. And people could then see whatever they have entered, what are the possible related terms, and the search engine can we built a search engine which can automatically expand the query and present the results. If you are not happy, you use alternative words, it would do the same thing for you. Now, why I'm saying this is that this is exactly what we do in today's world. Pre-generative AI search, we enter search terms, we get some results. If we are happy by looking at those results, then fine. If not, we change the words, okay, change the terms. But imagine there is a visual knowledge map based on ontology. I developed different ontology through other PhD students later on, but the first one was in 1998. You can imagine that it gives you a visual ontology of terms within a particular domain, and you can click on any of those terms, and those will be automatically used and added to your search query, and the results will be filtered based on that. Now, this is relevant in today's generative AI retrieval and output, which we will show in a while. So since then I have got other areas of interest, but main topic of today's talk is generative AI for information access. So what I'll do is I will take you through sort of what in the first instance what type of output that we get through generative AI. I'll then compare with something similar, generative AI tools created by the conventional database search service providers like Clarivate, like Web of Science database, and ProQuest and another new service called Scite, and compare from there, try and understand what happens and what is the difference between generative AI output and conventional, the output from a conventional information retrieval. I'd then like to also compare those both from the user perspective as the strengths and weaknesses of this output. And from there, I hope that I'll be able to establish a case that there are still some gaps in the way generative AI tools are used, especially for information access in the context of research and scholarship. And from there, I will move on to creating a research agenda and discussing on that what needs to be done, in my view, to improve. Now, do not get me wrong. I will say something, some weaknesses of generative AI, but don't get me wrong. I'm not against generative AI. My position here is that as technology emerges and evolves and new technologies come, we need to adapt them, but it has to be human and oriented to human and society. And therefore, we need to see the best way to adapt them to suit our needs, to help us do our job in a better way. So whatever I will discuss is not, there may be some shortcomings and criticisms that I will show, but the intention here is what we as academics and researchers, and with my sort of little bit of research experience within my small area of information access, what I think we can do to make generative AI more appropriate for research and academic information access. So for the first one is a search output from from a Google search. Now, we all do, do Google search, and when you do a Google search, you probably have noticed that the first top of the screen is an output generated by actually Gemini. So this is the top output. The query was, again, one of my favorite topics, because one of my books on information for sustainability came out last year, and I have written extensively in that. So this topic was what role libraries can play on sustainable development. So you can see, if you remember your experience of a Google search, before this Gemini, before this generative AI, what would you get? You get a list of websites, a list of links with some brief information, but it would not give you the actual answer. And this is the first important paradigm shift in generative AI. It generates the response to your question or to your prompt. So what it does, it gives you, look at this, and the AI overview. The first thing, it gives you an example of a summary of what libraries can do for you. And then it says, in relation to various sustainable development goals, specifically it can support literacy and digital inclusion, provide access to research, connecting government and community services, promoting environmental awareness, and educating about SDGs, etc. So very summarized set of responses. And this is particularly important because all of these things we would have to do otherwise by ourselves. By going through, whether you go through a Google search or a library search, we'd get a list of documents. So they are document retrieval rather than information retrieval. They give you a set of documents that match your query terms. And then it is up to you to go and read that. There are two potential implications here, good and bad. The good implication is that this gives you a summary of the results. So if you do not know anything about the topic, it summarize the results, it gives you sort of key points, and you can take it from there. Which otherwise you'd have to read a number of articles and try and understand them, assimilate them, and prepare something like this by yourself. This is one good thing. The bad thing is that it is giving the same result for everyone. So which means that the summary that it has produced, we do not know which sources it has used, at least by looking at this screen. Well, we'll see some other examples. But if a class full of students runs the same query on Google on its particular day, this is the result they would get. Whereas each of these students in a class, if they are given a list of documents, the way they would analyze it and the way they would synthesize the results probably would be different. Okay, so there are two differences that we can see. One is, it is a summarized output, that is answer rather than a list of documents. The second thing is that it gives a summarized result that everyone might look at, and it is the same for everyone, which would be otherwise different. This is the response from actual Gemini, rather than searching on a Google search interface. This is on Gemini. Again, very nice summarized result. It tells you it gives you in a brief introduction to the topic, and then it says social development, and then it also mentions specific SDGs that libraries can help in quality education, which is SDG 4, poverty and zero hunger, SDG 1 and 2, good health, SDG 3, etc., etc. So if you are new to the topic, this is fascinating. This is really a gift that it summarizes the results, and it gives you kind of in summarized points with proper headings and bullet points and so on and so forth. And not only that, it also shows that on which SDGs libraries can help. And I can say these results are very good because I know the topic. I have written extensively on this. So in a way, it is very good. But I'm not saying by the way that this is the best or there are no faults. We'll come to that just in a while. Let's look at another result. Again, this is another result from Consensus, which is another generative AI tool. And it does more or less the same thing. I've shown the arrows to show that there is a summary. Then it has specific headings. Under each of those headings, it has also summarized the results and given the citations from which is more like academic piece of work that we normally like to see. And I know the area, and this is why I actually asked this question, because I know the area, I know many of these authors. Many of the authors personally I know. Okay, so I know that these are really good work. Like, for example, there is the work that it cites from, for example, the people, Conway. Lynn Conway was the head of research at OCLC until last year. She retired. I know their work. Okay, I've actually reviewed some of their work. I can see there is another name, Missingham. She is from Australia, and I know that their work. So I purposely gave this as example queries to see that what the output that it produces, and I can vouch that many of these references are really, really good, and the way it has been summarized, it is really good. You might ask, by this point, you might say that we don't want to listen to your rest of your talk. We have accepted that generative AI is fantastic. We'll accept it as it is. But just hold on for a moment, okay? So, again, Scholar AI. Another set of results I'm showing, because Scholar AI is created particularly for knowledge and sort of scholarly activities. Research and scholarly databases can be accessed, and that's what the site produces. And it again gives exactly the same way, sort of numbered results and so on. And it gives also the author, for example, Conway, etc. And some of those well-known authors' works have been cited. So again, very good set of results. Now, if this is the situation, then try to situate this kind of development within the existing knowledge ecosystem. What choices do we have? If we want to know something about this, some topic that we do not know, most of us, sort of admit it or not, we start with Google. We do a Google search and try and understand what it produces. And we have seen that Gemini produces excellent results, a summarized output, and so on and so forth. That could be a good starting point. Or we could go and select one of these generative AI tools that is prepared purposely for supporting research and scholarly activities, like Scholar AI. We can get some results. And we are happy. We don't need to go to the library, and we can stop there. The question remains, is that everything that we are getting? Is that the best information that we are getting? And is that what we are getting is exactly appropriate for the purpose and the context of use? Because these are some of the things that we, within the domain of information science, broadly speaking, information retrieval, information access, information science, information management, we have over the years taught the society, the community, our students, and through them to others, that when you look for information, you should look for the quality of information, the relevance of information, the authenticity of the information, and the appropriateness of the information relevant to your specific context. So these are some of the things that we have taught. Are these all present? Do these results, the output, fit the bill? If not, where? We'll discuss that in a while. But in the meantime, also there is this big industry that work within the data and information field. Large publishers, large library aggregators and vendors like Web of Science, for example, Clarivate. They are multi-million-dollar businesses, and they have experience also for several decades creating, curating databases, creating interfaces and indexing, creating metadata, producing output, producing different types of data analytics. If you go to Web of Science, or Scopus or any other large databases, you will see all of these. The interface is very nicely created, and that shows their research experience within the academic and research community for a number of years. And that then says how they have incorporated those features. So this became a new challenge for them. So they then started creating something. So this is an example from ProQuest Research Assistant. Now, if you do a search, in this case, the example was generative AI, okay, and IR. So what it has produced, and I'll show you 3 different examples of 3 different outputs to give you kind of an idea of the breadth of research or activities that is going on within this research and scholarly database circle. So in the first example here, shows an abstract of an article. This is nothing new. Whenever we do a search on a library databases, this is something that we get. But what is important is the second parts, second box here on the right. It summarizes that paper and says that this is the key takeaway, and what are the topics that are discussed here. Why it has done that? Because it knows that you and me within the academic community, this is what eventually we will do. When we read a paper, we try to understand what this paper says, what are the key takeaway points, what are the key points that have been covered in this paper. So it tries to produce that for you, okay, in addition to giving an abstract, and then you can go to the full text and you can read it yourself, but it tries to summarize that for you as an aid, okay. Compared to that, this is an example from Web of Science Research Assistant. Don't worry if you cannot read the text. That's not the point. The point here is that this is, I can tell you that this gives a summarized result, okay? And you could say that this is exactly the same as Gemini would have done, okay? It summarizes the results on the query, okay? The query was the same as before, what libraries can do on sustainable development. But in addition, what it does, it tells you on the right what it says, that I have produced this summary based on the top 8 articles that I found, and these are the top 8 articles. It lists them, okay? So what we did not get from the previous ones, that we did not know how those articles were selected, whether the best or what was the only articles on that topic. We did not know. But here, because they know that, because they know us, because they know that, as a university as a university researcher or a student, you would ask that question. Okay, fine, you have given me the result, but what is the basis of your result? So it says that I have analyzed these 8 items, and this is based on the results. Then they know that your next question will be, but are these all? No, they will say this. This lists actually all the 98 articles that it found relevant to your topic. So this provides you 3 things. The first thing is a summary of the results on your topic, which is standard comparable to any other generative AI tool. But it knows also that you as an academic or a researcher, you would like to know that, okay, on what basis did you make this summary? It tells you that I have made this summary, and that's what is written on top actually. I have used document information abstracts from these 8 articles. The next question, of course, would be that, is it all? Are there more? Then it would tell you, yes, in my database I have found 98 articles. So in the absence of generative AI, this is what you would get. It would give you a list of 98 articles. Okay, now the rest is yours. You go and read them, take whatever time is needed, summarize them, if you can understand them, assimilate them, and that becomes your information. But it does that with the first screen. It summarizes the results, but it does not summarize all the 98 results. You can ask why? Because it is very expensive to analyze and produce within a very short time a large number of items and summarize the results. It is very resource intensive, and that's why most of the generative AI tools limit their results based on 5 to 10 items. They do not go beyond that. So resource is an issue, and we'll come back to that in the research questions. Right, okay, so this is again another example of site. And I've chosen this example. I was chosen actually by these companies to evaluate some of them and give some comments, on their output as a free service. But it gave me an understanding and critically think about what it. So what site does is that site knows also that when we review a paper, we not only review the paper, we want to know how that paper has been cited, where it has been cited, and in which context it has been cited. So these are the examples showing here. It shows that when I search something, again on the same topic, libraries and sustainable development, it gives a summary, And that summary is based on one of my papers. And I did not choose it by purpose, but that was the paper and it shows that how that paper was cited in different sources. So again, this is based on the knowledge of the user community and the way we access and use information. We often do this, like when we do a literature review, we read an article and we want to know, okay, whether this article has been cited here or anywhere, and how it has been cited, and how that citation chain or citation link could be one way of exploring further in this. So they have incorporated that. So through these three examples, we have seen that the database service providers and the vendors, they are also gearing up to adapt the generative AI tools. You can then ask the question, okay, so if they are doing, why are you sitting and wasting our time here? Again, hold on, we'll see. So if you want to compare side by side traditional IR versus generative AI, IR, there are some of the things that traditional databases and library research that have developed over the years. There has been a paradigm shift within the generative AI. And the first thing and the most important thing has been that it has been a move from keyword-based matching or even vector-based matching, but those vectors were created based on the terms appearing in the document. The shift has been to completely understanding the natural language. By the way, my second PhD was on natural language processing, so I kind of understand some of these areas. So it is based on the semantic intent of the query as well as semantic intent of the terms that appear in the collection. And therefore, and there are other features also, that multimodal search like text as well as multimedia and so on and so forth. And it can rank the results based on natural languages and so on and so forth. I'll not go through this in details. You can read these slides at your leisure. But this summarizes some of these points. So let's move on to the next one. So what are the key differences between conventional IR and generative IR? The key difference is that it takes away a lot of burden from the user or searcher, and the generative AI tool handles that. Two most important things that I have seen over my life as through my experience in doing my own research as well as supervising my PhD students and master's project students and so on. The first question is that if they want to search on a topic, what terms are most appropriate? How do we search that topic? Now, this is almost like an oxymoron. We do not know the topic, that's why we want to do something, we want to learn something, and you are asking me to come up with the most appropriate search terms, then and only then I will get the results. So that's one of the major challenges that students often face, and I have seen that in firsthand. As you are more experienced researcher, you are already sort of build your knowledge, and therefore you know what terms are most appropriate. Then the next question is where to search. You go to your library database, and there is a list of all the databases that the library subscribes. Should we search on any one? Should we search all of them? Do you have the entire life to finish your one-year master's program? So that's a second challenge. Then you run the queries, and then you do the search, and you get all the results and whatever. Then what? You still do not have the answer for your question. You then have to go through all the retrieved items, try and understand and read them, and then and only then you can assimilate and find the answer. So these are really very much time-consuming, resource-intensive process in terms of a searcher, in terms of a user. And this is a major paradigm shift. This is a major sort of move towards ease of use and ease of accessibility from the user perspective through generative AI. Generative AI takes all of these things that you do not really have to formulate the query. You can keep on in dialogues, and it can change the results and so on. It tries to understand and analyze the NLP. behind your query, as well as the content and data sources and so on. So there are some challenges also. The challenges could be biasness, hallucinations. It creates false, fake output. There are a lot of privacy concerns because the content on which the LLM models have been trained, you probably have seen on the news that there have been, some of the musicians, some of the artists are now trying to sort of sue some of these generative AI companies, tech companies, that their content has been used without their prior permission, and this is being used for commercial purposes. This has been sort of, raised on different platforms, that how the privacy concerns can be addressed, and so on and so forth, copyright and privacy issues. And also sort of, the transparency, that one of the most important thing that we do, and this is the gold standard in the academic and research world, is excuse me, is how is the reproducibility of research. That how do you ensure that your research can be reproduced? That is a big question for generative AI. Beyond search, generative AI can do something more. Now, this is, you probably have, some of you may have tried already. I asked Gemini about a research question, this is a new research area that I want to build. So it has produced the research results, but it also tells you what was the strategy. Now, this is a big step forward. It tells you this, it gives you the output, which I'll show you in the next screen, but it gives you, this is my strategy. Are you happy with this? Or if you want to change, tell me what should be the strategy. So you can see that there is a huge sort of, research going on there. This is the output that it produces as to sort of, detailed research plan on a particular topic. Okay. So I think I need to move a bit faster. Time is running out. So what's the future of IR? Okay, that's the question. Should we say, okay, take it as it is, as it comes? Or should we say, we don't want to use generative AI, our library databases are fine, we'll live with it? So what? Okay, so this is I asked this question to generative AI, and it says, and I am happy that it agrees with me that we should not abandon it, because generative AI is going to strengthen, make information access, information retrieval more powerful. It's the same result that came from another GPT-5. The same thing that it highlighted. In sum, generative AI will not eliminate IR, but will redefine it. Okay, so that was my position also. And these, I prepared the slides, but then I thought that, okay, let me ask Gen AI what the answer is. I'm glad that sort of our responses match. So there are three dimensions of sustainability that I want to talk about briefly. The generative AI in the context of information access and so on. So there are the people side, and there are social costs and benefits. There's the economic side, that there's a cost attached to it, who pays, who gains, etc., and what are the best economic models. And then there are the environmental side of it, energy and environment, because generative AI uses a lot of energy and so on. So every government, if you look at it, broadly speaking, throughout the world, have emphasized on human-centered AI and responsible AI. Okay, and then again, the social, economic, and environmental aspects of it, I want to situate it in this way. So this is kind of the model that I wanted to propose, but this is the broad model. Let me move on to the questions, and then you'll see. So when we talk about social sustainability, these are some of the questions that I want to ask. Okay. How do we inculcate responsible AI behavior within the users, but more importantly, within the generative AI tools, that what they give us as output, it should be sure that that's the best quality result, most authentic result. And we have, over the years, developed, they're not the best, I'm not claiming that they're the best, but at least some standards through H-index, through journal impact factor, through institutional reputation. Some of these parameters actually are used to assess the quality of the information, the source of information, and so on and so forth. So can we embed all of these within the generative AI tools? can we control or bring in the AI governance, and especially sort of user education and AI governance in some more sensitive areas like health, for example, where we need to give really the most authentic data so that it does not really create. There have been news, from time to time that people have killed themselves or people have completely wrongly diagnosed their disease or their kind of health condition by using generative AI. Over reliance on generative AI, are we going to create a kind of a loop where AI will generate information and then other Gen AI tools will use that? This is called autophagy, which is basically sort of creating a wrong sort of circle of misinformation or knowledge that has been created. So again, relevance judgment is an area that we need to improve, and user behavior. So these are some of the social sustainability areas that how we can embed social user context, user behavior, user needs within the generative AI. At the moment, it is one size fits all, and as you have seen with this. However, generative AI tool says that if you buy a commercial version, and if you kind of share your personal information with them, they will remember you, but they can provide you better information and data. But that's the question: that is it ethical? Is it right? Is it appropriate? And so on and so forth. Economic aspects of it. So these are some of the headline figures. As you can see, there is a lot of potential of generative AI for economy and so on. But coming to our individual sort of institutional context, I was told that Web of Science, for example, for a medium-sized university in the UK, they said their web research assistant is £20,000 per year. So if you take 250 universities, even at that price, although the price can be higher for larger universities, it is 5 million for one generative AI assistant only. But where will the money come from? Libraries subscribe to databases and then they top up for the generative AI assistant on it. Where will the money come from? So the research could be that, can generative AI actually do cost saving? Can we create smaller models, and especially can we create smaller models on open access data, open access content? Now we have lots of open access content and data available. So can that be a path? Quickly on environmental cost. These are some of the staggering figures that generative AI and environmental costs. Now, obviously, here there may be polarization in opinion. Should we abandon generative AI because it is so expensive, or should we accept it? My view is we should accept it, but try it. To give you the similar example, that should we switch off all our lights because power stations generate carbon emissions? Or should we try and create more energy efficient bulbs, more energy efficient washing machines, more energy efficient devices and tools, and so on and so forth? So exactly with the same example, the research could be that can we really create discipline specific models without using very large models, and discipline specific models of generative AI that can be used across the different institutions and countries within that that particular discipline. So that may be one way. This is almost my penultimate slide. So this is a broad model that I am proposing, that there are multiple players within this, and there has to be some kind of an equilibrium with this. There are the players within this, especially, now mind it, the connotation or the context is academic, research, and scholarly information. So there is the data and content that is created as part of the research and scholarly activities, but also as part of the other businesses and government activities, etc., which we also use. Libraries and the web play a role here. There's the AI industries are the new players in that. There are the researchers like us. There are the vendors like Web of Science and so on. There are the publishers. There are the institutions like NTU and the government ministries, departments, etc., and the government bodies. All of these need to work together to create an equilibrium and a balance. And this is what I am proposing, that researchers may work with the AI and tech industries, publishers, to address the social, economic, and environmental sustainability challenges. Libraries work with the publishers and researchers as well as tech industries to create, address research questions around AI literacy, equitable access, shared models, generative AI on open access, and resource sharing. Government agencies definitely can work with the AI industries as well as the researchers to look into the governance side of it and manage the generative AI industry responsibly. So that's the beneficiary, of course, will be the society at large, and better research and better resource sharing and so on. So I think time is up and I should stop here. Thank you.
Let's give a let's give a, okay, I think you've all clapped, but let's do it again, a more coordinated way. All right, so, working, thank you. All right, so we have time for a couple of questions. So if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, Professor Chowdhury, feel free to raise your hands and then we'll bring the mic to you. Oh, yes, one over here.
Thank you very much, Prof. Chowdhury, for your presentation. Talking about information access and generative AI, I have a question for you that is, do you think generative AI bridge digital divide or worsen digital divide? Because from one hand, right, generative AI make information retrieval much easier, but information evaluation become more critical. So what's your viewpoint on this? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a fantastic question, and I would class it as particularly as the social sustainability aspect of generative AI and information access. Indeed, you're right. There is a huge chance of creating more divide rather than bridging the divide. But as a researcher, and that's why I have listed that as a research question, that we can try and build use cases and models to demonstrate that how generative AI can be made useful and appropriate for different categories of users. I am doing a piece of research with the Scottish Library and Information Council to build generative AI, to adapt generative AI models for different groups of users, particularly vulnerable users, older people, and people of physical disabilities, as to how they can ask health and employment related questions and get the most appropriate answer suitable for their contexts through generative AI. So that's the piece of research that I'm doing now. Hopefully by March next year, we'll be able to build the prototype and test it. But that's a fantastic question, that we need to build on the one hand AI literacy, but technologically, now you see, the literacy has a negative connotation. We assume that people have to learn all the time. Yes, that is true. But from technology side of view, like say for example, we use our mobile devices for almost everything today. So can it be so easy that it becomes your second nature? And that is where we come in, that how we make the technology appropriate for people where the learning requirements become kind of less and less. The system and the technology can learn more about the users and prepare the answer accordingly.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Hello, my name is Julia. I'm a first-year PhD student here at WKWSCI. Thank you so much for your talk. It sounds like you've explored a lot of these different generative AI tools, and you have a lot of context in being able to assess whether or not their responses are accurate to the research. Do you have a preferred tool or recommendations for, young researchers about which tools are the most accurate and reliable?
That's a fantastic question. Well, let me phrase you this way, and this happens in a real critical situation. When doctors have a critical case in front of them, in a hospital, instead of one doctor making a final decision, they bring in other experts and share that information, critically evaluate that, and make a decision based on that. So that is my personal position, and in fact, actually, some researchers within the information retrieval world, in my article actually that is published in JIS, that will be published in next month, has examples of that. So recent research, what they are doing is they are using generative AI for dual purpose. You throw the same query to the Gen 5, 6, 10 Gen AI tools, get the results, bring them on board, and then run it through again each of those generative AI tools to rank them, so that the first time they use they are used as a searcher, the second time they are used as an evaluator, evaluating the results one against each other. So basically and this is actually a kind of right use of the generative AI tools, because if we have access to all of these multiple tools, they are almost like your own. You are a first year researcher. Imagine that you have got a few other people who are happy to search and follow your instructions whenever you want, late at night, early in the morning, whenever. They will do the search for you, bring back the results, and you can ask them questions on that. So that's the advantage of generative AI. And we should be able to build cases that how we can create multiple generative AI results together. And based on that, we then have multiple scenarios of progress, relevant research questions, etc. And then you make a decision. So basically, as a researcher or as a software engineer, your position is elevated, that you are becoming almost like a supervisor for all of them. But the key is the prompt. And the prompt engineering has to be sort of more appropriate, and you need to be able to ask the right question. So to come back to your point, if I had to answer it in one way, answer is not the problem. Question is the problem here.
All right, we have time for one more question. Anyone wants to ask the last question? Okay, if there's no takers, then let's thank Professor Chowdhury once again for the very interesting, insightful talk. Okay. And thank you also for your participation, for coming down here, and also for those of you who are online in Zoom. And we hope that you found today's talk insightful and makes you think about issues surrounding generative AI and information access. So we hope to see you in the next Leading Lights series. Thanks once again.